back. Now, the next individual I get to introduce is another leader that we're going to see as a congressman or a senator, a governor, and a visionary leader in the conservative movement, somebody who's fighting for principled conservatives, principles in the legislature, putting forth tort reform, fighting against the expansion of Obamacare. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Paul Curtman.
You say you want a revolution, well, you know.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that very generous welcome. Good afternoon, CPAC. I am really excited to be here. I'm really excited to be at a conference called the Conservative Political Action Conference because I'm a conservative, and the conservative's message is an exciting message. And the reason the conservative message is such an exciting message is because the conservative message is a message that's all about liberty. That's what it's about. And I'm a firm believer. I spent almost 10 years with the United States Marine Corps as an infantryman, and I'm a firm believer. I'm a firm believer that the message of liberty is an attractive message, and that people are just drawn to the message of liberty. And I think I can prove this because I think if we look throughout history, we'll see that more people have died striving to attain liberty probably than anything else in the history of the world. Liberty is an attractive message. The reason it's such an attractive message is because once you are able to articulate the principles of liberty to somebody, it's just like it was for me. Once I actually was able to wrap my mind around the principles of liberty, it was like my life was just like rejuvenated, and I suddenly had this new perception of all these issues that prior to my understanding of liberty, I wasn't able to really understand or articulate or argue for. You know, our founding fathers in the Declaration of Independence, Thomas Jefferson wrote, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they're endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights. Among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men." You know, our founding fathers often referred to our rights as unalienable or unalienable rights. They referred to them as rooted in the laws of nature, given to us by the laws of nature, nature's God. You know, because our liberty, once you explain this to people, once we can tell people exactly what these principles are, you know, the God who gave me a brain and the ability to think also gave me a tongue and the ability to articulate my thoughts. So my freedom of speech is just as natural as my ability to speak. And once we begin to frame the topics and the conversation and the issues within that particular narrative, the narrative of liberty, suddenly people's eyes are opened up and they see things just really outside the paradigms of the political party's narrative, but within the context of liberty. And it's an attractive message. I wrote a book, it's called Don't Tread on Me. In the very first chapter, I talk about individual liberty, individual sovereignty, the fact that you own yourself, the government doesn't own you. And I had this woman who picked up my book, and she was kind of skeptical, but she read it anyway, and she came back to me about 3 weeks later when I saw her again. She said, "Paul, you know, I really like those ideas that you had in your book, the idea of self-ownership, that you own yourself and that the government can only protect your rights. The government doesn't give you your rights." And then she said this. She said, "But the thing is, Paul, is how can you be pro-life? Because if you believe in self-ownership and that you own yourself, then shouldn't I as a woman be allowed to have an abortion?" And within the context of the principles of liberty, I asked her, I said, "Well, do you agree that there's a human DNA, specific DNA, unique to a brand new human being that's an unborn child?" And she said, "Yes." And I said, "Well, then by virtue of being alive, doesn't a life have a natural right to continue to live?" And at that point, I love it when the light bulb goes on. Because at that point, she just stopped and she said, I get it. The principles of liberty will change somebody's mind. It'll change their life. I believe that God gave us liberty. I believe as a Christian, I believe that God wants us to be free. I believe that God wants our governments to protect our freedom. I believe the founding fathers were right, and I believe it's worth fighting for. Thomas Jefferson, not only did he write that in the Declaration of Independence that governments are instituted to protect our rights, but he also wrote, "It is to secure our rights that we resort to government at all." That's the only reason that we're supposed to be going to government for anything, is just for the protection of our God-given liberty. I love the founding fathers. They had so much more wisdom than anybody, I believe, in Jefferson City, our state capital, or Washington, D.C. today. But the thing is we need good leaders. You can't count on the wrong people to do the right thing. You can't. So having a conservative political action conference something geared towards the grassroots as we move into another election cycle to make sure that we find the right kind of elected leadership who understand that their job description is to do something very simple just to protect our liberty. It's a simple job description. We have to find those types of people. You know, I'm tired of finding somebody who has the right message, but then they do the wrong thing. And the only reason they're doing the wrong thing is because they're the wrong person for the job in the first place. Actions do speak louder than words. But see, freedom is worth fighting for, and it's an attractive message. And if you've ever seen these bumper stickers that say freedom isn't free, you've seen them on cars. Some of you might even have one on your vehicle right now. But a lot of times people put that only within the context of our military, and they say freedom isn't free, think of veteran for fighting for our freedom. And that's all true, but the thing is we have a responsibility to make sure that we're fighting for freedom and liberty here in the homeland. And the reason is, right now, today, there is no doubt a 17-year-old man in somewhere in Afghanistan climbing up a mountain with a rifle and a 60-pound pack on his back, fighting for our liberty. We have to complete the sacrifice that these men are making overseas, because if we don't complete that sacrifice, I'm afraid that at some point in time in the future, it's all going to be for nothing. We have to fight for liberty here. It's worth it, and it's an attractive message, and we can reach people with the message of liberty. Over the last few years with the conservative movement, we've seen the Tea Party rise up and just really dominate in a lot of elections. I'm a product of that. I ran in a race that everyone told me I couldn't win. A lot of people told me I couldn't win. I ran against a deeply entrenched liberal Democrat. I walked away from that race by the grace of God with 57% of all the votes because I was able to talk to people about the message of liberty, and it's attractive to them. When Thomas Paine first came to America, he did a lot of writing. I think we all know this. He wrote books like Common Sense, pamphlets that really helped change the course of the thought in America, really helped change the course of the American Revolution, War for Independence. But he once wrote this, and this is a message for all of us, something to remember. He said, "When my country into which I had just set my foot was set on fire about my ears, it was time to stir. It was time for every man to stir." We have to make sure that we're stirring on a regular basis to find people that are going to Jefferson City or to Washington, D.C., humble enough to respect the authority of the Constitution, because that Constitution is all that protects us from people that really do believe they can go there and do whatever they want. And I'll leave you with this quote. Before I do, make sure you Facebook friend me on Facebook, because I want everybody here to be my friends. But a man from Texas once said this, and think about this. This is pretty deep. I've said this before, and some people immediately get a little shady, but you got to think about this. He said, "I prefer a man who will burn the flag and wrap himself in the Constitution than a man who will just burn the Constitution and wrap himself in the flag." It's all about our freedom. It's all about our liberty. We have to find those people that are fight for the Constitution, so to complete the sacrifice that the troops are making overseas. My name is Paul Curtman. Thank you all very much.